general for the project. Not a suit, I have to apologize for that. If I wear a suit around the studio, people think their show is canceled, so I dress the show. We have in our ULURP certain sign envelopes and general designs for signs, and the purpose today, as I understand it, is to flesh out some of those signs with the backdrop of the facades that you've seen before. Wegmans plans to open in about a year. We're restoring a historical building here, which will get different treatment. And some of the other buildings are shown here. Part of the purpose is not only to satisfy the retailer's need for visibility, legibility, and recognizability, but also to convey some sense of their competitive size, where their entrances are located. Signage is huge to retailers. Even before Amazon became what it is today, signage is just a huge part of their concern, and they need to know before they enter a transaction what they will have. We have tried to do a design where there's a consistency design. You'll see the method of construction, the materials, the colors, the illumination, uniform horizontal datum lines, all individual internally illuminated channel letters, and scaled appropriately within those sign envelopes. And also another purpose we see in it is to activate the street front. The entrances are expected to be on the inside, but while that is where the actual entrances would be, there's no reason why it can't be lit and attractive on the outside, so it's not what it is today, which is walking along what it's been for 150 years, which was a dark wall and nothing happening. This will have illuminated storefronts, signage on the street sides as well, and we have banners designed just to break up the hardness of the 200 foot of building elevation that ranges 37 to 40 something feet. Bring some color, bring some texture, bring some softness. Above the Wegmans, just to refresh your memory, is space we're building for the Navy Yard to ensure lease to their tenants. Their mission is to retain and create industrial jobs in New York City, and we are essentially turnkey building for them. And that's about it. With that, I would like to bring our signage designer and expert, Katie. Thanks.
Hi everyone. I'm Katie Osborne. I'm the principal of the Collective. We were charged with developing the signage guidelines for Emerald Row. As Doug mentioned, the idea here was to create a framework to maximize visibility for retailers, to maximize their opportunity, as well as work within the zoning codes that were allowable. So, as you're familiar, it's at the corner of Flushing and Navy, Southwest. Here are the viewpoints that we see around the entire site. We studied the pedestrian and vehicular traffic patterns through this to acknowledge where signage would be most advantageous. And then looking at a street perspective from that corner of Navy and Flushing, considering the primary anchor tenants and then the street level tenants, as well as the vehicular visibility with the banner, again, to break up that facade, create some softness, and as people are driving by. So the interior of the parking area, different zoning, and again, the idea is to work in the architectural features to maximize the signage visibility within those and still create consistency and maximizing the sign structures within those spaces. Renderings of the building C facing Flushing from the street, the street facade and then the parking lot facade. So you can see we have along the transom is the first floor tenants and then maximizing the anchor tenant space above. For the attachments and for the allowable spaces, there's a maximum of 25 square feet, 50 square feet per single tenant structure. If there were to be two tenants, we would split those up. This again allows them, we've created just a outline of space where they can have their logo or their brand, and it'll again allows them flexibility for placement. However, above the door, as you can see, is primary for directing people to the entrances. If someone were to take over the entire or two spaces, then the maximum would be 100 square feet for 2 days. So you can see here we have a consistency of placement along the channel there, and then above the anchor tenants. There'd be 2 anchor tenants with their entrances in the center, or a single anchor tenant above. For the anchor tenant, on the square footage would allow for 2 tenants to be broken up in that space, and then again the banner area. Now these can be mounted as low as 12 feet, but no more than 40 feet above. So there's flexibility in that banner. But location, however, vehicular traffic and breaking up that facade is a goal of that. Again, building C, looking at central entrance for the anchor tenant above, and allowing them space on the end bays for their additional logos, or if there were 2 tenants above there, again, end bays for their logos. Excuse me. Again, just more drawings to show space and maximum and minimum mounting dimensions if they were to be split up. And then the end caps. So, and the outlines of the buildings that would interact for visibility's sake. The end caps themselves, so we have the anchor tenant maximized of the larger space, and then the 4 tenants for building C would fall underneath that. And this would be on both the east and west side of the building. So building E, similar building structure, and but just slightly different in architectural scale. So same idea along the C channel here for the lower level tenants, and then the larger tenant above. And the entrance to the anchor tenant above is on the end cap, or end bay. And same idea, single tenant or multiple tenants here. Oops, sorry, too fast. Or if a tenant were to take their 2 spaces. So again, this was really about creating flexibility for them to be able to maximize their signage within the space. Second floor, building E again, the spaces for 2 tenants, what that size would be for the square footage if there were 2 tenants, and or a single tenant in those areas. The end caps, again, highlighting the outline of the buildings that would are up against us to block any visibility. We have height restrictions on signage in this area because of the zoning code, so that was the maximum placement height that we could apply those. Excuse me, and the information regarding the square footage, the mounting locations, and the logos. So getting into the actual attachment details, again, a core aspect of this project was to respect the architecture of the space and to create a attachment system that allowed for as little visibility of the attachments themselves. So in this case, we have a false back to the internally illuminated channel letters, and acrylic face, allowing them to have their color for their brand, and we have a minimum and maximum depth to the letter fonts, as well as the guide for illumination that we work with the lighting designers on. And of course, all wires and electrical would be concealed within that space. So more attachment details in there. Again, the frame sitting in the C channel, and then with attachments to the channel letters so that it appears as part of the C channel itself. And on the anchor tenants, second floor anchor tenants, looking at very slim line raceway profile that would attach according to letter forms in order to maximize structural integrity but minimize visibility of the raceway within the architecture itself. More mounting and wiring detail. And again, more of the same, just the structural components of the sign attaching to the structure itself. When we get to building B, this is the community center space. These are non-illuminated letter forms above the center door on the Flushing side of the street, and then larger second floor signage in the parking lot side of the street. Similar breakdown of the amount of signage area that is allowable in both particular locations, and and then again, non-illuminated letters, so these would be attached in a simple bracket attachment to the building itself. No raceway or backing. The building D, and looking at this from the Flushing side as well as the Navy side. The Flushing side, knowing that that would be the primary aspect that people would see this if they're coming along Flushing, whereas on the Navy side, that would primarily be visible from the parking lot side. And looking at the signage options and the breakdown of square footage for the tenant on this building. And then on the Flushing side, on the Navy side, either in the parking lot or on the street side, visibility of and using the ends of the buildings to maximize the visibility of the retailer or tenant. More specifics around mounting locations and the breakup of signage within these particular areas. And then getting to building A, with the Wegmans, these areas, as determined by that scope, we have the Admiral's Row logo in placement and a space that is reserved for the Navy Yard logo. So again, the breakdown of the location mounting and size, and the details of the signage bracket attachments to the building itself. And the Wegman specifications, again, internally illuminated letters, acrylic face. And again, the raceways, respecting the architecture, minimizing the raceway attachments in order to focus on the sign and lack of intrusion on the architectural facade. Again, more of the attachment details on the Wegman sign. And the additional food market signs would allow for an attachment at the top to allow the letter forms to hang from.
So the Wegmans it has the letter signs all the places you showed and the logo as well?
Yes, I believe this is the Wegmans logo, and this is on the parking lot facing side, the Wegmans logo, and then signs for particular access at various entrances as to their offerings.
So is that unique to Wegmans or others could do the same kind of?
This is unique to Wegmans.
So food market and market cafe.
Because they're different
Sub-brands
entrances.
of-
I'm
So,
sorry?
like, the store has an entrance for a park that's more of a cafe, and there's an entrance for
Right, there are multiple entrances and multiple exits. Generally, we have tenants with just one sign, but for instance, a pharmacy by law has to have a second sign and put a pharmacy as its own sign. So at least we generally will keep tenants to one sign unless they're needing one different line of copy.
But in this image, food market is not part
that's where I was mentioning before, that is the opportunity for us to put our mark on the site, and that's the portion that we're gonna occupy and control. And so that was the place where but right now, it's almost just a placeholder, because we haven't developed that yet.
And then Admiral's Row is kind of the branding for the entire kind of development. So in a way, sort of parallel to the brand of Building 77 or Building 90. So they're kind of like a unit, and then you have the individual occupant or tenants, of which Wegmans and potentially two others are anchor tenants. And then I guess less tenants.
So you're asking, what is the hierarchy?
Yeah, I
What
think
is-
there's one image where if you go back like a few slides, it shows all the tenants and potential tenant roles as a rendering.
Yep,
Um,
and again, of course, these are made up tenants. The guidelines will help the tenants understand their location and placement. Is this the rendering you were thinking
I
of?
think there was one where it's kind of an axial.
Okay.
It showed,
Way at the beginning, yeah.
it was,
Page 13.
yeah, it was actually that one, but I think this is the one. So
This is from the street, and this is the parking lot perspective.
if we go to the previous one from the street, for
Yep.
example, you know, here we don't have a sense of whether this is the Brooklyn Navy Yard. You know, is that important? I think that's a question. We don't have a sense that it's Admiral's Row. You know, we do get a sense like that there's a fitness place, but then, you know, those kind of like this sort of like tight.
We are not putting a pylon sign per se. Suburban shopping centers are different from this in a few respects. Suburban shopping centers have parking field in front and buildings in the back, so you see straight to the front of the store, you can see that storefront. And people put a perpendicular to the road pylon sign with the listing of some or all the stores. We don't have all the stores, we just have it for the anchor and sub-anchors, but that gives them visibility that would otherwise be blocked by the buildings because the movements of this really closed site. Retailers then have their own hierarchy. For instance, if an anchor will say, we have to have the biggest sign, anyone else has to be no bigger than half of us, and we're on top. It gets to that level of detail and domination. Wegmans wants to be known as this is where you go for Wegmans. They don't really want to be confused with Copenhagen. They want their own identity to be a destination. The Navy Yard has, I don't know how many entrances, 5. This is a notch out Navy Yard, and really has to work for the retailers' visibility from the street for the pedestrians, cars, and bikes, and public transportation. And that's the way we hope to overcome the ability to be blocking view of it.
So my question then is, you know, should we see this as Admiral's Row then, or, because we don't see it, it's what we see here, like, just based on what you're saying. So I'm just wondering what's the intent of like, what, you know, if I'm walking down the street or in the neighborhood, what do I perceive this space as? Like just kind of retail space that's disassociated from the Brooklyn Yard and not part of like, you know, Admiral's Row.
The Navy Yard never had retail. It's, you know, since gone out, it's just never had retail. It's really an out parcel from the Navy Yard. And the purpose of the signage is to convey what's behind the wall and how do you find it. And by being perpendicular to the road on this elevation, perpendicular means you're even parallel, so people coming from the other direction can see it easily.
But if you look at what we approved the last time, right, which were renderings, there's a distinctly different feel of what was approved. I mean, these are handsome buildings that you designed and are building, so that's terrific. But the signage seems to just fly in the face of, one, what we were previously approved, and I think what a lot of us here on the commission feels is appropriate for, you know, a hugely significant historic site, whether it's an out parcel for the Navy Yard, as they're now describing it, which surprises me. It still doesn't lose its importance as one of the most significant historical corners in Brooklyn. Admiral's Row was preserved, at least in part, for a purpose. strip mall. It doesn't feel that the renderings we approve are embodied in the signage that is being proposed to be, and I may be speaking only on my own, but I feel strongly that if we go back a few slides, and maybe it's not all that difficult to make those connections. And I don't think I have any problem with what's been done on Wegmans. It's not exactly the same, but Wegmans is what this project is about, right? But this is a little bit different than both in coloration and then the introduction of major signage, which can even be bigger than what we're seeing on the second story. Right, so let's go back to what was approved as an elevation, just one back, right? Okay, with the signs, maybe you need a little bit more than that. I'm not going to suggest that retail will be happy with this, it can be. But it's a big jump from what we're seeing here as what we saw last time and approved and what's being proposed.
I don't, monochromatic facades are not going to work for retailers. And generally, the hierarchy of signage is box signage, which is a big plexi panel, and then the rest with fluorescent strips and silk screen with the logo. That's the lowest end sign. And individual channel letters that are internally illuminated with plexi faces is really the higher end of what signage is and gives the retailer the visibility that they need. I think these renderings were prepared to focus on the facades of the buildings and not the signage per se, and that's why we're here. It's not known where the positions of the retailers are going to be, so I think what our presentation is trying to do is show you where it could be. And with respect to that second floor tenant, we have an envelope to work with. So what's going to determine how big that sign is two things. The letter height for the logo, because if it's a short word, it's going to be only this long. If it's a long word, the letter height will have to go down in that given envelope. And we don't know where the division of those tenants are until we sign leases. So we're showing you a smorgasbord of different possibilities of what would be there. I do think that the variations in color punctuate and make it more interesting. Retailers will not want a red sign next to another red sign, for instance. We're cognizant of that. What we need to do is promote cross-shopping. Our rents are necessarily high because of the heavy investment making in building facades here. And satellite stores, the sub-anchors are living off the traffic coming to Wegmans. And they need to be seen both from outside the centers up to know you want to go in, and from within the center, when you're walking to Wegmans, when you're walking out, you have to have a general sense of who's where. And they're counting on those shoppers that are coming once or twice a week to Wegmans to pull them over into their stores. And they can't pull over, they can't be seen and noticed and understood who they are.
I guess I'm not trying to stop you from coming here, I'm just asking, Admiral's Row, I kind of logo that's the thing, and it's not, clear to me how this might actually be based on these renderings. Because there's some renderings where we don't see some of these, let's just
Did you see what I'm sorry?
Admiral's Row logo, so, thinking of this entire entity as Admiral's Row, I think that, is it Admiral's Row, is it Wegmans Plaza, etc. So that's just my question. Which is more important to see? If Admiral Row is not that important to see, maybe it doesn't need such a detailed logo. That's just a thought, just a suggestion. So I'm just saying, when I look at this, I just kind of say strip mall. That's fine. But do I need to see that this is actually Admiral's Row, which is part of the building?
I think two things. It's a lot higher end than the strip mall, Webster, a lot of strip malls. And it's a different setting. But Admiral's Row is our marketing term for it, and we don't really want to press the retailers by being our name for center and dominating over them. Also, the real Admiral's Row attraction is building B and building T. And that's what we want people to really understand and have. I think we're going to be putting on
we spent some time listening to a master plan earlier from WXY, having to do with wayfinding, with relationships of circulation to a lesser degree, signage and so on. Building B and a couple of the other buildings are historic buildings and are unique. It's not a strip mall, it's not a regular mall in its development and the nature of the land to begin with. So you've got the historic. So what I think we're struggling with here is that you've got to sell these buildings and you've got to get these retailers to come. And Wegmans is a big deal, I think, for it to be located here in Brooklyn. But there's a balancing here, and what we're saying is that the signage, at least as we see it, is not exactly congruent or perhaps consistent with some of what we all talked about and approved previously. And secondly, that the balancing out of the need for the individual retailer and the overall location of these many uses in this place has not yet been as clear as it can be.
I think what we've tried to do through building materials and the facades themselves is respect industrial history of the art and show a blend of new and old, which is really the story of the neighborhood today. It is new on the shoulders of what's been there for 100 years. We are not allowed by code to have halo signs. I like halo signs. I love a halo sign, which is a backlit sign on the building D, the timber shed. I think would be really appropriate. Not allowed by code. Indirect lighting becomes tricky by code also. So really, we're looking at non-illuminated, which doesn't really work for retailers, or box signs, which are tacky. And I think the color is surprisingly new, and it's looking bold. I don't think you will see that in the same way in a light day. And I think if you look at the darkness of the setting and what's around the streets around us, I think it activates it and makes it much more, and there's some projects across the street that it makes it feel like a comfortable place where you can go and shop and not, it shouldn't be a mystery. People have to be comfortable that they know where they're going and what's there before they, and that's what we're trying to do from the outside and from the inside to the
I think that
it's a
goal
question
is
of
the same.
focus.
The way you just articulated is clearly, people have to know where to go, what's there, and to feel comfortable directionally and so on. And I think we're all saying basically the same thing. We just have several of the commissioners who know more were offering their considerations or thoughts that it may not have been achieved yet. And what I think that what you've said and what we're saying is what the goals are, where we are somewhat disconcerted or confused or saying that maybe it could be better in terms of the use of the signage for the retailers, the historic buildings, and the overall ambiance and wayfinding within the place. And that's what we're trying to say, and there were some specific thoughts about it.
I don't need to drag this out, but I just wanted to keep point to here. So this is not the first time in development like this has been done. I mean, there are historical examples in Boston, Ben Thompson, right? So there are all kinds of historical examples. Also in Europe, China now, Beijing, there are incredible examples where there are warehouse districts and then retail comes in. I mean, they're incredible. I've seen some of them. I'm sure you've seen many more. So I think this is an incredible opportunity for the community, the Navy Yard, and the development to come together to make something unique. And I think, what I see, and this is not to disparage what we've done, I think I'd like to understand more in a more nuanced way how the signage will be perceived proportionally from, there more pedestrians here than cars, even though there are a lot of cars at this intersections. I want to understand how it's perceived by pedestrians in daytime and nighttime. I see that there's conduit going into some of these, so I don't understand the illumination and how illuminated it would be. At night, I think it would be great to see that, right, the night view. We have often asked that of all kinds of projects. So I think that I just want to raise it up a notch. Like we think it's a great project. I won't speak for all, I'll speak for myself. It's a great project. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited that this is coming here. I love it. And
This is a very
and
nice design.
it's a clean design, you know, but I think the scale of the signage, I know you have commitments with your retail groups, but can't we get more control here so that we elevate it to something even more special than a strip mall? It looks a lot like Mount Kisco when you drive down the street, something where you see, you know, Barnes and Noble, you know, the Gap. So, I mean, not to disparage again, but that's all car traffic and then going to a parking lot beyond. But we're more than that. This is like in the heart of Huntsville.
Well, I would say there are a lot more cars than pedestrians here, I mean, Division 79, and Wegmans will draw at least 25,000 people a week. They won't be on foot by and large. I'm open to suggestion, but really I did building B in a pin, not illuminated sign. I didn't like that it was a sans serif exhibit here, but I thought that was in keeping with building B better than an interlinear child letter, but retailers need a certain scale, and the sign envelopes right now are not large compared to what they're used to. And they're it's very important to retailers.
I mean, I'm sympathetic.
Oh, okay,
I think we can get some pushback because of the scale and that this is urban. This is an urban site. That's what I'm not feeling. I know that people are going to work hard, but they're not ignorant about where they're going.
But our site is 6 acres. That's unusually large for New York City, incredibly large. So while you say urban, this is not 6th Avenue, this is not Broadway, this is not a sidewalk.
Right, but-
Tens of thousands of
But
people
some
on a sidewalk
professionals
in
can
a
study
subway.
what scale a sign is and from where I'm looking at it, you know, what I can see from where. That's all I'm asking. You know, it's like how small could we get so that people can see it and that the retailers are, you know, happy with a readability. I think there's actually a science to it.
But this is about, I would say in general, this is about a third of the size of what retailers expect. And really, we will struggle to get them at these sizes.
We're going to have to move on, so just right now, I think it's pretty clear that what you're presenting is not approvable. I think it would be good if you looked at some of the things that Lori just suggested. You think about maybe some precedents from comparable projects and spreading wire and whatnot. I think they're appropriate, but right now, this is not an approvable design.
Could I ask for a list of projects we should look at from someone?
We can follow up with, I'll follow up with some BDR.
Okay.
Thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Mark Foth, and I'm Deputy Commissioner and Chief Operating Officer of New York City Parks. Thank you for the time today. We're here to present to you an update and extension of the Parks Comprehensive Science Program components, which were approved by this Commission in 2011. So, as we've expanded the system, as the system has grown over time, the PDC requests were to build a larger family of signage based upon existing standards, which I'll show you in a moment, and create a kit of parts for layout, color, and mounting. Our goals at Parks are to minimize sign clutter, simplify the process of sign creation, and enhance and expand on the previously approved standards. So in 2011, this Commission approved the basis of the sign program. These were the basics of the design. It was a panelized system. You see different versions here, different sizes based upon different uses. This was how the system was to be installed. It was a system of panels. This shows attaching on an ornamental fence. These were some of the examples that were installed during the pilot phase. I will also pass out, because these are images that came after we submitted this in July, just some of the challenges of the system. Very expensive system to implement, very difficult system to maintain. Part of the challenge with the modular system, it was very difficult to keep the modules ever aligned. I'll just point out this photograph here in the middle, Hudson Park Playground, which is the example here. In order to do the comprehensive sign program, this panelized system, it required 16 different panels, requiring a total of 48 attachment points. So the panelized system, aluminum frame, DHPL panels, it became very difficult to maintain. As you see, particularly here in Hudson River, they just all started to separate when they attached chain link fence. They would start to skew a little bit. So moving away from this system, also we had no capability to do the system in-house, to produce it in-house. Just pausing a moment, this is all part of your 2011 approval. What was the palette of colors, the topography, the sizes, the typeface, etc. So we moved away to a single panel model system. So keeping the aesthetics exactly what you approved, the colors, the font, the sizes, the lines that indicate what would have been separate panels in the prior system, but become now one unified panel. Done in the Fiberbright material. This is the blue version of Fiberbright. This is the green version of Fiberbright if you want to see what the material is. We have complete ability to produce these in-house. The 3 languages, we work extensively with the mayor's office and communicating the 3 languages. I'll pause for a moment. The 3 languages are always English, and the 2 languages based upon the census tract. So the next 2 languages based upon the census tract. So here's the family. The top 2 are building upon the system you already approved, consolidated rules and regulations, and then standalone regulatory. There's basically 3 colors. The vast majority of the system is in the park standard green. Blue is used for beaches and ADA accessibility. Red is for danger, and yellow is caution. And it's only the 3 colors for the actual signs themselves. Again, probably 90+% of the system is in the park's dark green. Then the latest version of the signage is our informational and directional. Maps, directionals, and interpretive, which we have 2 full-size samples down here. So this is the newest part of the system. Again, on your left, starting on your left, there's wayfinding. Now this is pedestrian, not vehicular wayfinding. This is once you arrive in the park, if you're in the park, this is to help you find your way around our largest flagship parks. So you have wayfinding, and then you have maps and interpretive. Just talking about the color palette, again on the left, these are the standard, the primary color palettes that you've already approved, secondary, supplemental, and then we have a whole color palette for different areas. And it's very important, we use this color palette not just in our exterior signage, but I'll show you examples. We do many print pieces. So here's the maps. This is for Highbridge Park. So the same color palette you see here carries through to all of our printed materials and carries through to all of our electronic media. On our various electronic portals, we get about 500,000 visitors a month. Many of them are map-based, so they see electronically the same thing they see in paper, and then the same thing they see when they get out into the field. This is Highbridge. There's also Alicon. So again, these are all produced in-house, but it's all using the same standards that you're seeing today. So directionals, there's 2 sizes of directionals. Again, emphasizing these are pedestrian directionals, not vehicular. 12 inches by 18 inches and 12 inches by 24, purely based upon the number of listings we have at any decision point. But the standard is always the name of the park at the top in all capitals, the park's leaf, and then what's in front of you is always first, straight ahead arrows first, to the right second, to the left third. Again, the font style you've already approved, using international symbols for the knife and fork for restaurant, men and women for restrooms, I for information. The only thing specific to New York is that we are using, obviously, the MTA subways, so that's identical if someone has traveled on the subway to get to a park, they use the A, they use the 1, whatever. And the bus is using a generic bus symbol, but then the actual bus routes, the B24, the B27, if you're in the park, how to find your way back out to the public transit stops. Again, 99.9% of these will be in Parks Green, a few may be in Beach Blue if you're at our larger beaches, Orchard Beach, Coney Island, things like that. Then on the directionals, both a combination of directionals and map. So just pausing on this for a moment, this is the same map you're seeing here in actual full size. This is Highbridge. So I want to pause because a few things that are important to this system. First of all, the map is always heads-up mapping. Heads-up mapping means the direction you're facing is at the top of the map. It's the industry standard. I've got 20 years in environmental graphic design. And the reason for that is because if we have a paper map, you can always turn a paper map to orient yourself. You can't turn a sign. So when the sign says here you're at the lower end, the northern end, but you're looking south in Highbridge Park, So if you see that the BMX track is to your right, it actually is to your right. A comfort station to your left, it's actually to your left. So we use heads-up mapping in all of our maps. That means that we have to have both a vertical orientation and a horizontal orientation. Just looking around the table where the hydrogen one went up. So hydrogen may be an extreme example, but it's not that much different. So, if you have an east-west orientation or north-south orientation, it makes a very different presentation on a graphic. So again, vertical orientation, using the same icons that we use on print and electronic materials, always your entrance points, so identifying where you are here. And then when you're coming in, listing the directionals again. Straight in always first, to the right second, to the left third. Second standard we're using, which is industry best practice, is we're using time as an indicator of distance. Very few people know what a quarter mile is, or 300 yards is, or a mile is, so it's not pretty useless to give them that. The industry standard going back at least 20 years is you always use distance as an indicator. Although we all generally walk slightly different paces, so my 10 minutes might be different than someone else's 10 minutes, it's still a unit of measure that folks can easily reference. So we will be using time as a measure of distance. This is then the same map, oriented horizontally, so just go back. It would be 24 inches by 36 if it's a vertical orientation, or 24 by 48 if it's a horizontal orientation. So here you're coming into this point at High Bridge at Adventure Playground. You're actually looking east across the Harlem River, and the park is strung out a long way to your left and right. So you need a horizontal orientation. Also, I should note, we would never try and put the entire park on a map at one particular location, because that would make the sign very large, and no one's going to really enter at this point at Adventure Playground and actually walk to the BMX course. So in something like High Bridge, we would separate it into 4 sections. So that this is the section you're seeing would be the southernmost section. Occasionally, we might have a place where we don't need the directionals. Here's the point where you'd be entering into Adventure Playground. There's nothing that leads you out of Adventure Playground, so you're not going to come in here and end up going off somewhere else. You'd have to come out here and come back out to the street, come to another entrance point where you'd have a separate set of directionals with arrows now. And then interpretive. So this is, again, the photograph you're seeing here. Apologize, somehow in transit this got scratched, so the image is scratched slightly. But basically, this is the standard 24 by 36 inches for our interpretive signage. Generally, interpretive would be done based upon a series of subjects. It could be history, could be ecology, architecture. The need for them would be identified, or the request for them would generally be identified by community members and or our own park staff, something there that's important to interpret. But the basic parameters you're seeing here, interpretive signs will always be full lead. You're seeing they lead with the title in the upper left. Main title, primary text, 3 to 4 lines of information. Secondary text, 4 to 6 lines of information. Bottom left is the park logo with lockups of any of our partners, if we have partners in the park that's being interpreted. All the images, insert images would always be circles with a outline around them, and then even down to the leader lines leading in are always 165-degree angle, being ended by a solid point. So again, subject matter could change dramatically, but this would always be the design of our interpretive signs. A moment about mounting. As you may be aware, under Commissioner Silver, we have an extensive program to drop fences around parks to really open the view shed in the parks, increase visibility, increase a sense of safety. We have a lot of 4-foot fences now surrounding our parks. So this is the standard 3/6 to the top of the map. It's very legible from someone in a wheelchair. This shows it on a chain link fence. Here's some actual installations at 2 sites on a chain link fence below and on the park standard picket fence. You see there's obviously a consolidated rule sign. Again, I would just call to your attention, this is one panel, 28-inch by 48-inch, 4 attachment points, versus the panelized system where this would have been 16 panels and 48 attachment points. This is a mock-up, and to show you the reason why we don't do this, this would be putting the sign on 4x4 wood posts. It creates more infrastructure. We have to maintain the wood posts when you already have a fence right there to install it on, and you see it blocks the views into the basketball court and out from the basketball court. So putting the signage at the maximum 4-foot height helps us with a lot of issues of visibility and safety into our parks and out from the parks. If we do have taller fences, again, many places we have historical or iron fences, We may have taller chain link fences around ballparks and stuff. The standard is 5'6" to the top of the sign. Again, within industry standard for pedestrian, a standing adult. Also, someone in a wheelchair can be the top line of the signs. So that shows how they're arrayed. If we don't have something to put them on, so there's no existing surface, we use 4x4 wood posts, 8-foot posts, 2 foot in the ground, a little over 2 foot in the ground, 5'6" to the top. The sign is flush mounted to the side of the post and flush mounted to the top of the post. The post would not be painted. We would just leave them wood. So it's kind of patina over time. If we paint them, it becomes something else we have to maintain. On the backs of the signs, so these signs that would be freestanding, on the backs of the signs we would do kind of this wallpaper of our logo. It's kind of like, one of the reasons to do this is to eliminate the blank backs. So right now, if this was freestanding at the park, this would be a blank back, which creates a huge graffiti magnet. And we believe that doing this system of just a subtle array of the logos across the back would be less likely that this would be tagged. And also a little elegance to the back of the signs. Here again, single post signs on some of the smaller signs, 4x4 posts, again 5'6" at the top, but where we're using single posts. Where we don't have any other way to install the interpretive sign, you'll see in a moment we'll use these metal frames that are down low. The attachment techniques are very straightforward. Tamper-proof screw on the front, straight through to very conventional hardware that locks into the chain link fence. So all you see on the front of the sign is in 4 corners. You see the tamper-proof screw. Same thing on any of our iron post signs. So again, tamper-proof screw. Sign is all designed that the screw doesn't overlap with any graphic image or any text or any line. Very simple attachment in the back. All of these can be easily installed by our own staff, so we don't have to rely on contractors. We fabricate all of the signs in-house now. Here they are if we need to do them in a freestanding. So here's your 4x4 wood post, flush mounted, sides and top. You see a bolt there and a bolt there. The back of it has a crossbar at the top and the bottom just to hold it rigid. You wouldn't have the crossbars, it would be the sign itself would be carrying the rigidity of the sign. So there's a cross member top and bottom. And then in the places where it's appropriate and or we have no other strategy to mount the sign on, these are standards. National Park Service, many folks use these standards for the interpretive signs. Directionals, to the maximum extent possible, directionals would always be mounted on existing posts. We don't want to create more visual clutter. We don't want to create more infrastructure. We have, a park, a path, you're walking down a path, the path splits, you need to make a decision to go one way or the other. Perfect place for directional and high likelihood that there's going to be a pole right there. So standard banding onto any pole, just like you see for almost any street sign. And just an update of what we've done so far since February 2017. We've installed now well over 45, this is a presentation we submitted to you back in July, well over 4,500 signs. We have re-signed all playgrounds under 3 acres, all of our beaches, pools, tennis courts, marinas, piers, skate parks, dog parks, and green thumb gardens. Part of this is cleaning up the visual clutter that's out there. So while we've installed about 4,500 signs, we've now removed close to 9,000 signs. This is what it looks like at Orchard Beach when it's cleaned up. This is the before and after. This is St. Catharines in Manhattan. Before you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 signs. Different materials, routed, metal, plastic, fabric, something, paper. So 7 signs, which are now 1. Similar here, we have 5 different signs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Signs are put up different times, things change, now all unified, 1 sign. And my favorite, at our beaches, no way was anybody actually reading this. In fact, we were putting signs up on top of signs. So 7 different signs, different topography, different languages, different materials, different fonts, different everything, 1 unified sign.
Where's the lifeguard on duty sign?
The lifeguard on duty would actually be on the back of the lifeguard chairs. That's where we always sign lifeguard on duty.
We do have it's not in that picture, but there is another standalone lifeguard sign. We have 2 standalone signs, the lifeguard one plus the consolidated post.
And then we've also, again, we've probably eliminated 8,000 signs around the field. We've gone through and have found storehouses upon storehouses upon storehouses of old signs. This part will remain unnamed. But I came upon this summer, hundreds of signs stored, stockpiled, old, incorrect information, wrong topography. These have all been cleaned out. So we did a round last fall where we collected 15,000 signs and sent them to the recycler. Since then, we've probably done another 5,000 or so. So I'd say it's conventional that we've probably taken 25,000 signs off of the parks and out of the storehouses in order to create the unified system. For example, the unified system, we've built a sign shop or enhanced our sign shop on Randall's Island. Our staff produces all of the signs in-house. We very rarely need to rely on contractors now, so we can turn them over very quickly, produce them very quickly, replace them if they get damaged. This is just a photograph of one run. This is doing playgrounds less than 3 acres, how the signs are all produced in-house and stockpiled. That's the presentation.
Looks like the government's working.
Well, thank you. You'd like to think so. Another thing is behind you, Christine DeBrow is the Chief of Marketing and Development, and Christine and I co-manage the sign program from the operations perspective, and with her is Vanessa Valdez. Vanessa Valdez is the Art Director for Parks, so Vanessa and her team of graphic designers are the ones that have designed everything that you see, so I'm sure you get appropriate recognition. So we're certainly available to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, and it's wonderful to see the before and afters, and just, kudos to this program. Full disclosure, I'm not a graphic designer, but the one thing that caught my eye, and you all have already defended it, and I leave it up to Manuel, I don't believe in the time markers on distance. I really feel that if you've got a 2-year-old, or you're a jogger, or that notion, and as New Yorkers, that may be appropriate in some places, but as New Yorkers, we've grown up with the grid. 200 feet is like emblazoned in our brains, a block. So I don't think we're as, spatially incompetent in distance as you suggest. I'm asking this as a philosophical question because I don't know. It just seems that there's so many different abilities out there, and as a recent grandmother of toddlers, they take forever to get from one place to another. So time doesn't, I would ignore time. I wouldn't ignore distance. But I just ask others' opinion.
I would just say one of the reasons, again, we did it is, perhaps just a moment, if you will, a little bit of my background. I'm a landscape architect. I came here and I joined Parks in January 2017 as the agency's first chief operating officer. I came in from Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, where I worked for 18 years and was the first deputy commissioner, where I comprehensively re-signed that entire program twice, the entire Philadelphia Park system twice. So I have a little bit of familiarity with this, and a lot of the Society for Environmental Graphic Design, which is kind of the leading agency that provides this for 20 years, going back to the mid-1990s. They've promoted use of time. Time is a measure of distance. Because I completely appreciate when any of us are out on the grid, we get it. We get the grid, we get how many blocks something might be. We know the short blocks versus the long blocks. In Philadelphia, we have 400-foot blocks, etc. I get it. But when you get into a park, like Highbridge, there is no relativity to the grid anymore. There is no. I mean, you come in at one point, and you want to get to another point. You want to get to that comfort station, or your grandkids playing a game on this ball field. There's no relativity to that. There's no relation to the grid anymore. So there's no real way to talk about any other unit of measure. Yes, we could use a quarter mile, or so many hundreds of feet or hundreds of yards, but that's really the only 2 measures other than time. Because we can't rely on the grid, because the grid obviously doesn't go through the parks.
Sure. I mean, as I said, if that's the way it's the standard, then I defer.
One convention like other DOT signs is there's an icon, I think of a man walking.
Yeah.
That could be, because actually if you see 10 minutes, it may not actually be clear what that means.
Right. So
like a tourist.
yeah, the DOT signs on their map, it's interesting you bring it up, because the DOT signs does use time as a measure of distance. So the gray signs we see on all the kiosks use a 10-minute circle. So where you are, and then has a 10-minute circle,
Right.
so you see everything within that 10-minute circle on the grid if you're going to a park or some Lincoln Center or something like that. So that system does use time as a measure of distance. We could think about this, Vanessa. I mean, we could do, like a you are here, we could do a 10-minute circle around the you are here that would capture everything within that 10-minute circle. So you could tell if it was out, you could tell that this basketball court is outside the 10-minute circle, you can maybe judge what's twice outside the circle. So it's about
And you
20
can see
minutes.
it relative to the rock, too.
I have one more, not to kind of get into the too many cooks in here, but just as an architect, you know, I'm always thinking about what is this in relationship to? So, from lots of people are, but I mean, you said we never show the whole park, and I thought, that's kind of strange, because even if you just had a key icon, like this is how big, a keynote, this is how big this park is.
Sure.
And this is this piece, because you're often, especially in Central Park, you're somewhere like where,
Yeah.
you know, our other
Yeah.
edits or, you know,
That
just.
would be,
Actually,
that would be super helpful, actually.
Yeah, we've talked about that. So yeah, I
I
mean,
don't want to clutter it
I
up, because it's
just-
very elegant, but I think.
just happened to pull this
Yeah, no,
out, because
you're right.
we could put
Yeah.
Just
a
a
very
little-
small
yeah.
A
key.
very little key that just said, this is
Right.
this little piece.
This is the southern
That
fourth
little piece
of
that
the
was
four
pulled out.
floors.
I don't know.
And for me,
I think it's going to be very easy here. I think it's a little bit more complicated when we do like a prospect park that's so large. It's going to end up being a series
Yeah.
of blocks, because there's only so much information you can fit on a sign to make it legible and
Well,
keep
you
the sign
just
a
have
reasonable
the
size and it doesn't
footprint
become a
of the park.
billboard.
You just have the perimeter of the park, it's like an abstract thing, and then this is where you are.
Sure, yeah, I think
And
that's
I'm
a great
kind of
idea.
in that third or something.
I mean, for my part, you know, I don't necessarily think that the map needs like a radial like circle to show the distance for walking, but maybe just an icon next to it, you have it here. And, you know, I think you may not also need, or see, you know, you just need kind of here, but I'm also a graphic designer. You may just need like an icon in like 10 minutes instead of the pines, and it like just goes on so long.
Like an icon in front of the
Yeah.
person
And
and
it's
10
a
minutes.
different-
Yeah, I think those exist on the DOT signs, but then, yeah, you don't need the signs.
But it's overall
It's great.
very
Great.
fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
It's great.
Very excited about it.
Representing SL3 Realty Corp., New York City and Greater East Midtown's largest landlord, and I am the project executive of One Vanderbilt. One Vanderbilt will be a 1.7 million square foot, 1,400-foot tall office building designed by Cohen Henderson Fox that is the standard bearer for the transformation and resurgence of Greater East Midtown. It was developed under special permit for Vanderbilt corridor rezoning and will bring $220 million in public realm improvements, better throughput on the 456, better pedestrian circulation for subway riders of all lines of the terminal, and connection to east side access, the creation of a new public transit hall, and the creation of a pedestrian plaza, which is the reason why we're here today. During ULARC, we showed an illustrative design, and the feedback we received was that the ultimate plaza design would come before the PDC, and that it needed to support and facilitate pedestrian circulation. 2 years later, when it came time to actually design the plaza, we held a global design competition and invited the world's most renowned landscape architects to compete. We met with 10 landscape architects and invited 4 of them to submit proposals to a formal RFP. From those designs, we selected Peter Walker, PWP Partners, who designed the National 9/11 Memorial and the recently opened and raved about Transbay Transit Center Plaza in San Francisco. From there, we embarked with the DOT on the approval process for this design this past February. And over the past 7 months, we have worked collaboratively and intensively with the DOT, the MTA, the NYPD, FDNY, and the city and the state more broadly to ensure that the design was acceptable to all parties and addressed the significant safety, security, and pedestrian flow concerns. In July, we presented that design to Community Board 5. Members of CD5 asked very thoughtful questions about the design and ultimately voted 28 to 5 in favor of our proposed design. One Vanderbilt is scheduled to open in August of 2020. The public realm improvements, including the plaza, must be complete in order for our tenants to occupy bonus floor area in the building. We all share a commitment to delivering public benefits before the building opens, and it's essential that the plaza be open once the building is open to facilitate the needed pedestrian connectivity and throughput. So now I'm going to turn it over to Marty from PWP to present the design. Marty is a design partner at PWP and teaches at Design Studio at Harvard's GSD. Marty?
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here in front of you. It's my first time with you all, and
Little butterflies, and in order to get through it quickly, I'm going to read what I'm doing. I think Rebecca's let me set up over here. I think everything's going to work pretty well. Our firm has a long history of thoughtful and beautiful landscape architecture, and it's landscape architecture in exceptional places. It's certainly our site here at 1 Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt Plaza and Grand Central Terminal is one of those special places. Knowing that your time is short here with us, I want to leave as much time as I can to answer questions. So I'm going to move quickly through the more straightforward slides, like the location, you know where it is. The adjacencies are well known to you. You've seen the presentation, so again, I'm going to go through it rather quickly on these straightforward ones. The existing conditions. If you've been to the site recently, you'll see that the tower is well underway. And these renderings depict the realization of the tower space by night and by day. I'm going to pause here for a moment because this, although very simple drawing, indicates the existing conditions prior to construction, where our real challenge was how do you make something wonderful out of a street? Classic problem for landscape architects, changing the core function of a place from a street. Now, the immediate plaza area in Vanderbilt Place had only about 42% of its area dedicated to people, and in contrast to our proposal, which dedicates now 87% of that area to open, free-flowing pedestrian use. And with the increased building setbacks along 42nd and Madison, the pedestrian space there on the whole rest of the block is increased by a substantial 32%. The features of our design are classic and restrained to really straddle the design spectrum from historic iconic to soaring contemporary. New sidewalks, a beautiful patterned granite plaza floor, 5 stone discs for planting, and a proposal to include a significant piece of sculptural artwork at the north end near 43rd Street. And all of this is contained within the requisite bollard-protected security perimeter. And here you see the increased sidewalk space and bollards along Madison. And this image illustrates the increased pedestrian space with the bronze area as the plaza and the space provided by the increased building setbacks on Madison and 42nd illustrated in gray. Our challenge has been how to make the space something more than just a beautiful floor, to facilitate the flow of 20,000 people per peak rush hour, to include an appropriate series of objects that will make the space memorable throughout the seasons, yet not impede pedestrian movement. To that end, we commissioned a detailed model of pedestrian traffic at peak rush hour, and that video is available at the end. It's a minute long and quite informative. And that helped with the size and positioning of the objects to maximize their visual impact while not interfering with the flow of people. The model revealed that we succeeded, the discs actually working to help guide people throughout the space and disperse them in the plaza toward their destinations. I can point out here also that the study revealed that there's such high volumes of traffic on the public sidewalks on 42nd and Madison that we intentionally avoided placing planters or other objects outside of that unencumbered space along Vanderbilt Place itself. As for the discs, 5 became the perfect number, leaving room for the greater crowds that are streaming in and out of the Kitty Kelly entrance at 42nd, and also leaving space for the sculpture to really celebrate the Grand Central Porte Cochere toward 43rd. And we actually think about the discs almost like rocks in a stream that have been softened and rounded by all the turbulence. And indeed, they're to reduce the turbulence. So we have a perfect shape. It's a timeless circle for these objects. We studied shadow patterns to see that we have sufficient light for the selected plant material. The tree form is chosen particularly to complement the rhythmic cadence of Grand Central and bring some vegetation into a part of Midtown that's just devoid of such, especially devoid of trees in the public realm, while we're being careful not to block this most commanding and elegant facade. And the same can be said of the trees and their relationship to Grand Central's new contemporary partner, One Vanderbilt Tower. Yet for the trees' open, slender forms seen against the facades, seen here now in a long north-south perspective, the foliage gains a stronger presence. It's kind of like looking at your hand as you rotate it around in your outstretched fingers, now having a whole new spatial definition as people move through the plaza itself. The cross-section through the plaza shows the relationship of dimensions of the features, the discs, the trees, the mounted planting, and the existing bollard line that remains along the facade of Grand Central Terminal. This view shows a little bit more of the technical side of things, where we have how the space will drain toward the center, be collected at the base of the discs, and the limited space within which we can work above the Grand Central Terminal concourses and retail space below. The gentle upward mounding of the planters provides just the right amount of soil volume to ensure the viability of the trees. And it necessitated, and that size of the discs are really necessitated by the restricted amount of space we could take up to keep pedestrian flow moving. And then, of course, we couldn't go any lower because we're going to mess with the concourse waterproofing. Then on top of that, we had to address the security requirements to assure that the mounded planting and the bottom of the tree foliage didn't interrupt clear lines of sight through the plaza. So we skirt quite a few issues. So here you can see simply an overlay of this superimposed basement below the plaza. And here you see the steel plate ceiling of those spaces in 2015 when the street was removed for the waterproofing remediation. And all of our work must be installed above and isolated from this waterproofing layer. Amid all these constraints, we have brought beauty. This image conveys the quality and character of the planter discs, made of limestone, with the represented material palette on the right, and we've brought some samples here for you to look at. And you should note that the underside of the bullnose shape of the disc edge has been shaped to include a continuous light strip to illuminate the plaza floor.
I'm sorry, is that going to go all around the building? Because I noticed the envelope of the building has a lot of sides. Or is it just going to
These
be
will
all?
just be those 5 locations in Vanderbilt Place in the plaza area.
Is there a restriction to you doing the whole envelope of it?
That was, I mentioned that this,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that. You finished your presentation.
oh,
Because it just-
whatever, Madam President, whatever you want to run.
Yes, please finish and
Oh,
we can address
okay.
it.
Good. So, another thing about this compound curved edge that has the shape it does is that it really dissuades sleeping, dissuades skateboard grinding, because you really can't get a purchase on it. But yet, it still offers that slight short-term perch to wait for a friend or to check a message. Discussions are ongoing with the Grand Central Partnership to find places to set out movable furniture. I mean, it's been a conundrum for us to have such high volumes of pedestrian flow, and you certainly want a public space to be congenial and welcoming to people with some place to sit. That's on everybody's mind, and it's something that is an ongoing discussion because of the significant concerns of Community Ward 5 about making sure that our prime mission of facilitating pedestrian flow in this high-density transit center is maintained. That said, the discussions are about a management program that will bring the furniture out during non-rush hour times and stow it away. And that, I think, is something that the design team is very supportive of. The bottom image shows the range of the paving materials. You see the subtle, elegant composition of the dark thermal finished granite cobbles and the lighter hone granite to create the overlapping circular ring pattern. And this move of subtlety is very similar to what we worked to achieve at the National 9/11 Memorial with the paving pattern there, as you can see on the top. We're striving for the same elegance for the perimeter security bollards, finished in bronze to complement the existing Grand Central bollard shown on the left, with a simpler contemporary shape similar to the image on the right. And I'll point out that bronze is also a significant feature of the One Vanderbilt lobby. We believe we've achieved a successful balance of object and space, form and function that befits both the contemporary architecture of One Vanderbilt and the timeless grandeur of the terminal. With the changing seasonal planting that we're proposing, we're also introducing a sense of anticipation for commuters. There's people who are going to be coming through this on a daily basis. They're visitors, of course, but there are a lot of people that this is their daily route. And we really want to spark their curiosity, maybe much like the Channel Gardens, where you just wonder what they're going to have out today. And that throughout the spring, summer, fall, and winter, by day and by night, with the ambient glow coming from the bottom of the discs that complement the One Vanderbilt lobby and ambient light and the light from the Grand Central sconces to really give the plaza a beautiful glow by night. And I hope you'll agree that we've overcome the constraints with a better opportunity, and that our proposal is starting to make sense for you, and that's the end of the show. We now happy to give you as much time as you need to talk through the proposal.
Thank you. Question. If you go back and you show the circulation and with the people in it, you have, there's this, and then, okay.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you. And so, given the design of the pavement, there seems to be, although the materials look more subtle than this diagrammatic treatment, it appears as if you are anticipating here that people will, tell me if I'm wrong, will adhere roughly to these circular channels or lanes and use that, which I would say is almost completely doubtful, incorrect, and so on. And we don't have to go back, and I will for a second, to Holly White, who said people go and move and stop in their own ways and are not like almost the lanes in a car, though I know this is a place that is controlled by DOT. So I just wonder about the anticipation of that, and you're seeming to direct people into lanes too quickly. You said that at the rims of the circles, they're low, and clearly you are concerned, as are the police and others perhaps, for people to be sitting there or sleeping or whatever, yet at the same time you said, but people could sit on that low circle, which I have to say, perhaps you don't have to be as old as I am to wonder about the effectiveness and attractiveness of that. So those are a couple of questions. I do have others, but I will stop now to ask at least about those and pedestrian
Yes.
flow and density at different times of the day at night.
Great, happy to answer. I think first off, that's really, your comment is really interesting because it hadn't even occurred to us. We're thinking about, say, for example, the Campidoglio in Rome or Piazza San Marco or anywhere where there's vivid paving patterns. They're really not intended, so our intention was never
The
to.
Piazza San Marco doesn't work that way. People go,
Well, people are able to go, we can show the, we'll show the video of where the traffic study
we
showed
saw that.
people were. Were they able to see the?
Yes,
Yes, we
part of
did.
it.
Oh, good.
Yes, we
Okay.
did.
All right. So, yes, the paving pattern is not intended to direct people, I think, in terms of a lane issue. And we really did have to strike a balance between wanting to have some opportunity for someone to just perch for a moment. Now that the disc will be at the edge of the disc will be at a common sea level, much of the little.
At this height, because it doesn't look that
Yeah,
way.
a little lower than where you're sitting. So again, that's us really trying to thread the needle between wanting this to be a beautiful, attractive place, but it's contrary to a lot of spaces in Manhattan. This is not a place that's intended to attract people to stay. It's a place intended to foster the tremendous volumes of traffic. And that's really why we commissioned this very in-depth pedestrian flow study, which showed the traffic at 20,000 people per peak hour moving through the space. So I hope that.
Before we get into detail, what is the designated fire lane here? You've got a 20 lanes, but one of them is encumbered by the bollard. So give me the basic criteria here.
Sure. The reason that we didn't talk about the fire lane is we've had an exceptionally good conversation with the fire department that this space does not need fire access. So they previously contemplated a fire lane is not necessary.
Okay.
And I think that is, correct me if I'm wrong, documented in our letter from FEA line.
Yeah, I'm Brian Robinson, I'm the head of security for SL Green. We work collaboratively with the fire department in regards to the access to the plaza. After detailed studies with them, they realized that they can reach all these Siamese connections to support responding to Grand Central Terminal and responding to 1 Vanderbilt from 43rd Street, from 42nd Street. And also they can reach their ladder from the Park Avenue Viaduct onto the amenity space.
Oh, terrific. Okay, I'm not pushing the fire department, please.
But, but there is still a requirement from our other stakeholders and first responders, most of which are in the room here, to have access to the plaza, which we do have on the north and south end by removable security bollards. So that 20-foot lane in between the frontage, the eastern frontage of 1 Vanderbilt and the western end of the disc, that 20-foot, that is a lane by which.
Right, because that's my question.
That is
Because
still a lane.
The site is not equal. From the standpoint of a pedestrian, that line of bollards that has to remain in front of Grand Central shoves you further away from the facade of Grand Central. And so I'm trying to figure out whether there is an emergency requirement for 20 feet between the edge of the discs and the facade of 1 Vanderbilt.
Yes. In collaborative discussions with our stakeholders, particularly the MTA and the New York City Police Department, they require access into that plaza. And if the Grand Central bollards, because the Grand Central bollards will remain that are currently exist, the only way, given the design which we work with that facilitates the pedestrian flow to still provide vehicle access, would be on that eastern frontage of 1 Vanderbilt.
Could you flip it? Could you put more space in front of Grand Central and less in front of, and still accomplish 20 clearance? It's just a question to think about. Because we have a lot of concerns about this design. I'll just be completely straight up here. And for us, this is one of 4 or 5 more blocks of Vanderbilt. And the concern here is the precedent that this sets. It is a very self-referential, one Vanderbilt-centric design. It is not a piece of urban design. And it is beautiful, minimal, just as I would expect a PWP project to be. But it is not a piece of urban design that I think is appropriate for the corridor of one Vanderbilt. And I think that the paving pattern that was just spoken about just reinforces the self-referentiality of that. It doesn't speak to connectivity from one space to another. And I also think that the space as designed, and you mentioned about possibly some movable furnishings, it's not hierarchical. It doesn't have there's no there. You just want to get through it. So I personally have a lot of concerns about this, and I'm just trying to understand what are some of the drivers behind it. And I also have to say that I've seen the shadow studies. You've really got a very limited amount of sun. Not sure whether plant material is appropriate, but I think the columnar trees do not enhance the space. They either would need to be, the finger, that doesn't do it for me. It either needs to be more or staggered and of course you don't even specify what that tree is, you just say columnar tree, it's, Quercus robur, what is it, what girth will it have, what mass will it have, is it a carpinus, which will look ridiculous, so.
We won't use that.
No, but would someone would like to speak about it?
Perhaps I can answer to my question first. I asked a question.
Oh, yes, indeed, sorry.
Because just to understand the connectivity of all the areas. What is going on the other the other three sides of the island? In other words,
Expand, yes.
You mean, you're talking about in the footprint,
Yes.
in the development footprint?
yeah,
So
exactly.
the entire space outside the building footprint is pedestrian space. So what's happening, and particularly the design of the building, as it went through all of its design review, was canted away so that the facade of Grand Central would be as apparent as possible within the private property. The private property line is a slight red square you see there. So that area, given the model happens to show right now the volumes of people on 42nd Street. So we particularly took the stance that the rest of the perimeter block should just be well paved, the bollard security perimeter, and free and open without
Will it be
other
matching to the pavings on this side?
No, it will be.
No, it's standard New York City concrete for the
It's
3
standard.
years.
Okay.
Within the property line, we don't know what they're doing, but
That will be, we felt that that's an area that should match the standard city concrete up to the facade of the building, and let the floor of the plaza be the special pavement.
I have another concern also. There's a spot for a sculpture in that space. Considering, which I think that it might be too site specific to have these decorative floor planning, I would be, if you plan on having a sculpture there, I would urge you to use a selection that mimics the selection for the Center for Arts program and the panel which convenes and asks certain professionals to sort of go through the same similar process. Because I think it would be in your best interest to have that sort of feedback, and also relating to the landscape, whether, the height of the piece, the width, and all of that relates to DOT's concerns and all that.
Certainly. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about the area?
There's a cross
work with the DOT to?
Yeah, so we're still in the early discussions of talking with the property owner about what that process will look like, but there will be a selection process. We will certainly involve the commission, and it will have to respond to this site. So it's still early stages. We'll take that feedback and obviously talk about the percentage process and what steps are involved with that with the team, and see how closely we can mimic that.
But on the sculpture, what my question would be, why have a sculpture, I mean, we're all in favor of public art, why have a sculpture in a place which is geared to continuing movement of 20,000 people a day, and you're questioning that there's ever a time, or maybe there will be, that anybody could sit for a minute to look at anything. It's all about going through. I mean, it sounds like, oh, it sounds good to have a public sculpture, but I'm not so sure, given all the other goals here and some of the questionable designs here, to be focusing on the sculpture before solving a number of other problems.
Well, one thing I'll clarify, that we all know there's rush hour. So rush hour is when the 20,000 people per hour are moving through it. There are very quiet times, say 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, where I'm told that there could be just 10 people up there moving through it. So that is one of our challenges was how to not have objects that were in the way while still creating a beautiful place. So the sculpture, we really felt, was yet one of those things that can make and distinguish the space and get a piece that's appropriate through the appropriate selection process that could really be a substantial, significant piece of artwork for the public to enjoy. And we think, obviously, I would expect that an artist would be really dealing with the transit aspect of what's going on in the plaza. Then we get a piece of art. I would hope to have a piece of art that really is responding to the fact that a lot of people will be just looking straight ahead, trying to get where they're going, and other people will be able to see it from a distance. So those are our goals for the artwork.
So maybe just to summarize, I think I'll try to summarize. So the imposition of a rigid geometry in one of what will essentially be 4 connected, street environments is problematic, because it seems as though it's overly determinative in a very rigorous way that could be antithetical to the sort of generalized movement of people throughout that area. And while Cindy's 100% right that it seems totally building referential, in some ways it isn't. We have one of these discs right in front of your beautiful building's lobby. What's the point of that other than the imposition of the rigid geometry? I mean, certainly people would be going into your building from Grand Central Station. We want them to have a clear vision and clear access. Instead, they're wandering around a disc that's there because you want to have them equally spaced in all directions. The equal spacing doesn't work on the southern end of Vanderbilt because the bollards swing out. We understand that. You have room on the left because the building facade hangs back. So if it weren't for the rigid geometry, you would be able to have a design that is simultaneously more anticipatory and accepting of future kind of development of Vanderbilt, and singularly sort of more responsive to the building itself, which this isn't. It's designed elsewhere and plopped down. And, I couldn't agree more. I think the location for a public sculpture is, again, sort of inappropriate, right? It's a public street, and you have a rigid landscape design. What does a public sculpture need to be there, other than every big developer seems to today like to, build fancy public sculptures in their front yard? It just doesn't seem to work holistically with both the urbanism of the general site and even the specific and quite beautiful architecture and pedestrian activity of the building. That's at least what I heard. I don't know if people want to add more than that, but for us, to be blunt, it needs work.
So, I'll just add my waste now, so, as an architect, so I was thinking about the relationship to the buildings and the space as a negative space, and you showed some views at the very beginning, I think, of the kind of cavern that this sits within, because the sections that you showed through the lobby, right across through your piece, don't include that cavern.
Yeah.
So this is going to be very diminutive in that cavern urbanistically, which of course, like, what else, you know. And so my question also with thinking is, are these trees going to grow? Where's the sun? You know, which I'm sure that's what you do. That you study that and make sure that these 5 trees will grow. And they're not going to all look like that for their entire lives, because they're living things. So I was thinking about that, how a tree is a living thing, and I want to know what kind of tree it is. Is somebody going to come in and prune it all the time? And I remember the tree in the Bank of China. There was a tree that was put on top of the building and then it died. You know, like one tree dies, and Robert Irwin has a piece in Marfa in his courtyard, and then one of them go. You know, so they're living. So you can't really. I was thinking about how do you maintain this level of perfection with nature? And there are very difficult neighbors, obviously, here in this very urban condition. And then I would like to know, because I have tremendous respect for the work, your work, and for also the deployment of a minimalist strategy in a place like this, because we need to have the space. The void space is what's critical, right? But I guess what I'm wondering is, I'm wondering about the process. I'm just curious about your process, like how you came up with this, because there's so much bilateral symmetry, with the exception of the sculpture, which I imagine you'd be perfectly happy for it to be gone. So the bilateral symmetry in both directions and the identical repetition of the pieces, the flowers don't even change, like they do on Park Avenue sometimes as you drive up from one point to another. So there's a real insistence here on a continuity that I'm just curious about. So I just have a lot of questions that I'm just presented with the fait accompli.
Can I ask you a question? What do you mean when you say about the neighborhood? And
So this is part of a larger rezoning, which was done under the Bloomberg administration. This is the first and by far the most significant building that's been built and will be built. But the original design, and I can certainly be corrected if I'm wrong here, was for the Vanderbilt corridor, which is only 4 blocks. The whole street is 4 blocks. Would be incrementally, as development took place, incorporated as pedestrian access or some.
so that all of the corridors would be.
So that the linear street would
Would
have.
be the same.
Can we address this, because it's actually factually not
that's
correct.
Okay, great, let's hear
So,
that, because
I'm Zach Bernstein with Free Frank, we're zoning council to SL Green and talking about this process. This is a very site-specific mapping change to this block of Vanderbilt. There's nothing in the zoning from that proposal that suggests that there would be a demapping of the other streets along the Vanderbilt corridor. There may be thought processes within DOT to implement and roll out some of their new programs along there. I know there have been some discussions about the possibility of that, but there isn't a master plan rolling out, and certainly not under the rezoning that resulted in this building was there a plan to continue. And if somebody redevelops the building to the north of here, there is nothing that mandates or even encourages the demapping of a street and changing it to a plaza.
So this
right, we
is-
heard differently. What is DOT's view?
Yeah.
Perhaps just clarify that. I'm David Green at the Public Space Unit at DOT. The rezoning of One Vanderbilt was a standalone.
Yes, that is understood.
But it does fall, or it's surrounded by the larger Greater East Midtown.
That's what we thought, yes.
Which does contemplate or includes within its public realm concept.
Right.
The possibility of
Great.
public realm enhancements
That's
further
what
on
we
the
understand.
That's what we understood.
Separate to this process, but
Fine.
within that larger frame.
But that's what we understood.
Just to add on to that, I'm Caitlin Lewis with City Hall. The public realm is no design plan for the Vanderbilt corridor, the projects would be voted upon and implemented on a standalone basis.
Right, which is, I think, speaks to the question as to whether it's a D-mapped street or a mapped street that becomes somewhat pedestrianized or whatever, that this is in fact some form of a precedent that will inform how other streets are viewed in the Vanderbilt corridor, however that is chosen to be implemented. And it, enough said.
Can I just ask one question respectfully of the police? The bollards, the bollards there, which are there now, excuse me, as I understand, they are to stay. Am I correct? And then you are changing that there are removable bollards at either end?
Correct.
Okay, so it's always, one of my understandings about bollards, and we're working on that in a lot of ways, is that bollards, it is to be hoped, have the effect of stopping a vehicle from going into a building. Right, so this will be a vehicle-less, there won't be regular traffic on this block. Sydney asked about, the emergency access and what can happen there. Of course, Grand Central is a premier building and everything has to be done for its security. Why do you have to keep the bollards the way they are now when there won't be vehicles coming in? And if you do it there, though, that's the public building. Are bollards to be expected elsewhere and requested from the new building that's coming up? After all, private buildings ask for bollards also. Why continue the bollards? Are there other ways? And might there be other requests for bollards here and elsewhere? And I wonder about that in terms of the streets itself. This is going to be a pedestrian street.
Right, so the bollards that are currently installed around Grand Central Terminal are part of MTA's infrastructure.
Right.
And Anthony Craig will probably address that.
Yes, so many years ago, more than a decade ago, we went through a very arduous process of installing those bollards, which included the cooperation of DEP, DOT, and this body, which was headquartered across the street at 233 Broadway, and we did receive revocable consent. We articulated to the federal government that we needed to make an investment in this infrastructure, the most iconic transportation hub in the country, if not the world, and the federal government funded us. So we put perimeter protection around the entire perimeter of Grand Central. So to take away that protection would leave us with less degree of protection than we have had for the last 13 years. So we're not prepared to put our ridership, our customers, and tourists, anyone who passes through Grand Central, into greater harm than they've been for the last 13 years. Understanding that you're saying vehicles won't come in, but they will be able to come in when the bollards are removed. And then we would be ceding control for security to SL Green's third-party contractor, who has to remove those bollards and put them back in place. So if we remove our bollards, then we're not protecting ourselves, we're relying on SL Green's third-party contractor, who they hire to protect Grand Central. When we had full protection of Grand Central already accomplished with the help of the federal government, who made a $20 million investment.
Thank you.
A question. Appreciate that. Two questions. This bump out here, is that due to subsurface conditions or the prior curb line?
Prior curb line.
Can that be straightened? Can that little loop there just become a straight line?
That was actually discussed when we met early on with SL Green. It was proposed, and there would be some engineering challenges due to the waterproofing underneath, but Metro-North engineers agreed to look at it, and that was a consideration, but subsequent conversations, I believe, indicated that it may not have that effect. Are you correct? And I think SL Green felt it may not give them more pedestrian space. I don't want to speak for you, but it wouldn't really accomplish that much in that aspect. That's something we were open to at least explore.
Yeah, we believe we believe as a design team that straightening them out would be a help.
Now, why is the building deemed, this is a question for PD counterterrorism, why is the building deemed in need of bollards around its perimeter?
Well, the building itself is a super tall structure, so based on everything we learned from the events of 2001, any building over 600 feet, we believe is a sensitive location. This building being 1,400 feet, it rivals the other super tall structures in the city that are, for lack of a better word, targeted by our adversaries. So it requires the bollard protection, and the bollards are actually part and parcel of the structural design of the building. So the building is actually built to withstand a certain event that will take place at that distance that the bollard creates.
Okay, can I just ask, I'm sorry to go back to this. I want to understand about the Vanderbilt corridor. There is no obligation right now in anything, is that your understanding, to make this contiguous spaces? When they were rezoned?
We all agree with that.
Were we aware of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay, please.
I feel like some of the renderings are more focused on one Vanderbilt. So if it's possible in the future presentations have some renderings that show the facade or the west facade of Grand Central, and it will help balance the view. Because I feel like I didn't see, there's one elevation that shows the west facade, but not the west.
The view down, the actual perspective, I keep looking for the perspective, I never see the actual space.
Another question I have for DOT.
Photographic, as a photograph or as a rendering.
Question for DOT is that, as it's been explained, the lighting for this space is reliant on private property illumination. I've never known you to accept that before. How is it true
So,
in this case?
again, I think in this instance, we're still at the early discussions with the lighting plan, right? This is still a conceptual design at this point, so those details are to be developed. I think from DOT's perspective, given the location, we did recognize the massive amount of pedestrians here, and we're trying to avoid having to put additional pedestrian scale light poles in this design. So we still have to look at the photometrics with the team, and I think we're also looking with the Grand Central Partnership, Ryan Kirk from, about how to potentially place lights outside or on other existing light poles to still provide the adequate level of lighting that is needed, while not necessarily relying on just the ambient light from the building. So it's still to be developed, but it's not quite breaking with our policy of saying, oh, ambient light is fine. It's really not that.
Well, but I mean, I really say that because if it turns out that more vertical objects are needed in order to accomplish the illumination, that should actually be part of the design. Or whether a bollard can be, have a light stuck, I don't know, but it just, do you have any questions for us? Have we been sufficiently clear?
Yes, I think it seemed like there was an interest in understanding a little bit more, and I think especially the issue of why the objects were there, and they didn't start out being regular. We looked at random locations, and it's really the pedestrian study that helped inform it. And the reason that they're not at the Kitty Kelly entrance is that transiting across there to get into the new access point for the subway, all of that really needed to be a very free and open, unrestricted place. Then we did feel that at the north, at the Berkshire entrance to Grand Central, that would be a place for something different, something unusual, that animation of a significant sculpture. And then with that, all of this kind of led us to that. And then there was a comment about the plant material. Well, SL Green is in charge of maintaining us, and they're committed to this substantial plan to change the plants, even to the extent of changing trees. Plans to grow trees and have them at a nursery be able to change them, look at significant sizes. That's another reason why, FDNY didn't need to get in. We wanted to have bollards to be able to remove so we could bring equipment in. First, it's structurally sound to bring equipment in to move in a substantial sized tree. So the idea is that we really felt that in our hearts that this place, in a way, I see the fact that it is one block, and certainly if all the Vanderbilt places had closed, I think it would be a different, or changed, it would be a different solution. But we really felt that this was a plaza there to honor Grand Central and deal with movement. And so those discs became the vessel that could hold enough plant material to give that seasonal quality and not restrict pedestrian movement. We started out with schemes that had rectangular patterns, different patterns. We had triangles. We had every bit, about 18 different permutations of pattern because we felt pattern was important. But then we really felt that the simplicity of the circle is quite a timeless object and element, and that the movement around it was very important. And that was, we started to locate light columns or sculptural columns to animate the space, or try to put in rectangular planters. All of those were just creating hard edges for people to move around. So this became, for us, just a very simple scheme. And simple, I use that in the strictest way of not being dumb, but being calm and facilitating movement and having this nice degree of coming up one day and seeing the plants all different by the seasonal change. So that I hope is some of the explanation for where this rigor came in, and the fact that we really had to honor moving people along the two facades, the widening, the reason the discs are in the middle, the reason the disc is right in front of the One Vanderbilt Tower entrance is that it is there to disperse and allow the people that are coming from north and south to move across from the Vanderbilt side or the Grand Central side into One Vanderbilt. And then, so all of it was really about running the pedestrian flow studies and seeing that we were not impeding traffic and trying to in a way optimize the elements of the space beyond just the floor.
Well, I think we'll have to continue this conversation offline. We can get additional feedback and revisit future submission. I think you've heard the commissioners, some of the questions, concerns, and we'll work to improve this.
Thank you for the comments. It's really good to be in front of you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. PTC, in coordination with Central Amusement International and Zamperla, are presenting the company use of amusements for your conceptual review. There are 5 distinct sites that make up the project. Sites A through E will include an employee and handicap parking lot, a unique new flume ride concept, an adventure area featuring a rope course and zip lines, a new entrance to Lewis Park, providing food services, information point, and ticketing, and a new pedestrian public access area with 2 access ramps to the boardwalk. Jay Chrysler, Head of Engineering Service at Zamperla, is presenting.
Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Jay, as you said, presenting. So I understand that I have a limited time frame. I was told to give a presentation in 10 minutes and then open up the Q&A.
Apologies for being so late too.
And we got 60 slides, so I'm going to go through very quickly until we get to a layout and rendering of the first site. So if you want to slow me down, you can, but I'm going to spend about 5 seconds on the initial slides. So these are existing photos of current projects with Coney Island. This is the last project we did for in front of PDC, the Thunderbolt Coaster. Area map, Coney Island. Zoom in, another zoom in, showing the 5 distinct sites: Site A, Site B, Site C, Site D, Site E. Another map. So this is the aerial view from the cyclone right there, going all the way up to the parachute tower. Here's the layout where that's Site A, Site B, Site C, Site D, Site E. So vehicle flow for emergency traffic, accessibility of boardwalk and ramps for pedestrians. Under the boardwalk access for parks and maintenance, such as utility and boardwalk. Some site photos, we can come back to these if we need to. All right, so I'm going to start out with what we're calling Site A. So I'm assuming everyone's familiar that the area has been rezoned and there's streets have been demapped and there's some new streets. So there's an existing, what they call one-wheel way, and we've already developed that on existing sites. And it connects up to a street called West Walk right here. And then this is going to be, I think this is 16th Street. So this is from the new map site, and what we're going to do is we're going to put an asphalt walkway here with some parking spaces, and we have to provide so many parking spaces for lifeguards and everything like that. So there's not much really to do with it, so we're just doing the basic landscaping, parking spaces, and where this rotunda will be themed with our park theming, based out flowers. We're going to have some benches and some walkways and some more landscaping. So it's a little easier to see in the rendering. Probably should have started with this one, but as you can see, here's some landscaping areas, planters, walkways, just to make it more comfortable for the guest experience. So some sites showing the inspiration. You can come back to these if you want. More site photos. All right, so this is the log flume ride. So our goal is to do A, C, D, and E by 2019, and the log flume, because we have to design and fabricate, this is going to be a 2020 project. And I can discuss this at length because I am more of a ride designer than a developer. So I don't know if anyone knows the history of Coney Island, but the Shoot was done at the turn of the century and became popular there. So what we've done is we've tried to capture a lot of the original nostalgia and architectural features, like these arches are based off of the original Shoot at Coney Island station and gating. So this is a nice 3D, gets to give you a nice idea. So we have two lift hills. We'll leave the station area, do some white water, go to the first lift hill, do a little double drop, a little bit of white water, go to the bigger lift hill with a big drop. Again, it's more of my area of expertise. We'll come back if you want technical questions. Here's where we're capturing the lighting and the theming from the original Coney Island Shoot. More site photos. All right, so this is Site C. This is going to be a road course. I think the 3D rendering is nicer. So we'll have an entryway right here. We have the actual road course. There's going to be some zip lines going back and forth. Here we're going to have 4 different levels. It's going to be one for kids and then 3 levels, beginner, medium, adult. I think we have called emotional, and I don't know what the extreme one is. There's going to be 2 kiosks for point of sale and food or merchandise, some beautification with some painted pavers, and then some seating areas for the guest experience. More site photos. This is probably a good one. So this will make sense on the next slide. So when you come out of the subway, Coney Island, this is what you see. So what we're going to do is to give like a central focal point when you're coming out of the subway. We'll see this, what we're calling facade or port. Now this one actually exists currently in what we call Lot A. Lot A is the site of Luna Park across from the Cyclone. So it is basically be a copy of this. And when you come out of the subway, you'll see this. So it will give a focal point, a central part of where to orient yourself as a guest when you come off the subway. Because a lot of times people are confused because Eden's Wonderland, Eden's Wonderway, Luna Park, and there's some disorientation, so this will give a focal point. On this, we'll have 5 kiosks, 2 food, 2 merchandise, 2 games, 2 food, and 1 merchandise. This area up here is currently existing, it's landscape, so are these 2 gateways into the existing Luna Park Park. So this probably won't change. We'll have some shade structure for comfort, benches, and some light landscaping, planters. Alright, so this is the last of the site. 2 kiosks right here, seating capacity, some shade structure, and general beautification. So, did that take too long?
That was brilliantly done.
Okay.
I see this on Vanderbilt, that's me. Question, It's great, it's fun, it's just what it should be. I guess I had a couple of concerns about durability, and whether you feel that, you know, the materials are sufficiently robust. I'm thinking about paint on concrete, thinking about the, you know, planters, are they big enough for whatever you're trying to do there? Really green roots, that would be kind of interesting. And then the LEDs in the ground, which I'm just, you know, I have no problem with the design. I think it's fun, it's wonderful. I'm just concerned about some of the durability.
Okay, so let me start talking with things I know. So when you do concrete, you can put the paint in the mixture. And from my experience, a very good point, certain colors are more durable than
Oh,
others.
it's pigmented concrete,
Yeah.
it's not painted concrete.
Yeah, I would think it would be pigmented concrete.
Oh, okay, take it back, sorry.
Okay, all right.
Never mind, I
thought you were.
thought it was just literally paint.
Yeah.
Pigment,
Well,
yeah.
paint then would be a maintenance thing.
Yeah,
I guess paint is a possibility. Paving plans are not 100% designed because this is conceptual, but I would expect for durability, we'd probably go with tinted concrete. That would be my first choice. Again, nothing's been quoted,
Okay.
so we're doing
Okay,
conceptual. For planters, we have existing planters in the park. We found there was a lack of greenery, so we actually made some nice planters. And Fernando, he could probably talk more to it because he's the GM of the park. That's Fernando. He is actually the GM of the park. And I found there is a tremendous amount of foot traffic, and there is surprisingly little vandalism and destruction to them. Fernando, correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm actually confident that the planters will do all right. For the LEDs, we are currently investigating many vendors, so we have found that it's to more or less minus 30 degrees Celsius to plus 50 degrees Celsius. We're basing most of them on European vendors right now, but we're exploring lots of different options. And the ones we're looking at have experience with spas, saunas, spas, and actually seaside. One of them has experience in seaside, another seaside in Southern Italy. I don't know exactly where they've had good experience. So.
Can I just suggest while you're researching to look for the solar in-ground lights?
Okay, yeah, I think we have looked in solar, but I think that's more for renewable power, so that we're doing the solar to do it, and we reached out to a vendor in New Jersey. Again, it's still too preliminary for me to pretend like I can give you all the answers.
Because if you find a in-ground light that doesn't burn out, I've got to know that.
Okay.
No, I think it's great. Others?
So there are solar, you're looking for solar in?
No, right now they have LED.
Yeah, so there's, here, let me go back to this.
We've seen the economics of
Yeah.
Which is beautiful. I think it's absolutely terrific.
Okay. And you're correct, it does say painted paving there, but I don't think we'll do that. Again, it's too preliminary, but, and there may be, I don't want to say something like we're definitely painted, because we may paint one out of convenience, but if I were to do a big one, I think we'd do the tinted concrete, but this is what we're talking about here. So I think a little solar one may look awkward, so I think what we're actually more thinking conceptually is to do a solar panel somewhere so that there's renewable energy. So, but that's still, again, preliminary conceptual on that part.
So that's all this is.
Okay, is that it?
Love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
I like it.
The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda. Items number 26745 to 26789 today. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees and recusals. Staff has noted Commissioner Montalbano's recusal from 26789 and my recusal from item 26787. Are there any other recusals not noted? No, let the record show there are no other recusals. For the record, no members of the public have signed up to testify on any of the consent items. Is that true? Anyone wishing to testify on consent? No, let the record show no one wishes to testify. Someone make a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? All in favor, please raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of the consent agenda. Now we are going to be hearing a public presentation on 26790 John DeLury Square. Do we have anyone wishing to testify on this project? First, okay. Is there a sign-up sheet?
Yeah, so we'll do the presentation first.
So, of course, we'll do the presentation first, then we'll have the public wishing to testify, and then we will deliberate. Hello, Alex, good to see you.
Hi. My name is Alex Hart. I am a landscape architect with the company Central Landscape Architecture. Just briefly to explain my role, I was with Parks for a long time and was the designer of this park originally. When this project came up, I offered to help with the design pro bono, so just assisting with this. I was officially approved by Parks for this project only to do this specific work, so I'm familiar with it, so that's why I'm here. Great to be presenting again to the PDC, one of my favorite buddies. Some purposes of this very small project, we have a very small budget, and the main idea of this is just to give it sort of a refresh. We have several pieces that need to be done that couldn't be covered by maintenance funds, but that need to be covered and taken care of. I'm sure at some point there will be a larger redesign of the park, just like always, but that's probably sometime off. So we're trying to support some efforts by the Friends of Billary Square and basically upscale the planted areas in some ways and be able to provide a better environment. Just some quick context. It's just right around the corner, actually. So we're in Lower Manhattan on Fulton Street between the World Trade Center and South Street Seaport. So it gets a lot of traffic, a lot of people walking past, as well as a lot of people living in the area. It's a small park, not very large at all. In terms of use in the area, it's typical mixed-use Lower Manhattan. There is a large residential complex here called Southbridge Towers. And again, a lot of tourist traffic going up and down Fulton Street. So it's a very heavily used park. And you can see this even more so when you look at the parks that are around in the area or lack thereof. In this entire neighborhood, this is pretty much the neighborhood park unless they walk up to this part of City Hall. So it's very well used. It has been from the beginning. There's clearly a need for more, and I know everyone involved would love to see more parks in this difficult area, but it's been popular from the day it opened. And that caused some issues, actually. As the park originally opened, we had a lawn area that was almost immediately well overused. We were worried about people using it, but what we didn't anticipate was the dogs really overusing it. And there were a lot of issues with dogs coming in, tearing up the grass. People were basically using it as a dog run because there weren't any dog run facilities around at the time. So this resulted in a lot of damage to the park, especially the grass area in the middle, and then also some of the plantings around it. Partly in response to that, the Friends of Billary were formed several years ago. In response to seeing this park deteriorate right before their eyes, they really wanted to help out with that. So they organized, one of their first issues was to push through the community board a creation of a no-dog designation for the park, which happened. And they were also then continued going, and to this day they continue to do fundraising and other maintenance, including full planting and cleanups, community outreach, that sort of thing. Park supported that by installing this temporary range fence at the entrances to the lawn. You can see already it is coming back. It's not exactly an ideal situation for lawn, but it is coming back with the fences in place. Now access is entirely restricted. The only people that go there are occasionally the friends who go into the water, so that's pretty much it. So we have this range fencing, which is, it's about as good as it gets for range fencing, but clearly not an ideal aesthetic. To give you an idea of the overall existing conditions here, you can see the lawn area. It's quite narrow all the way through. The range fencing is the orange line here, which has sort of been installed ad hoc. And then mainly, there's the main pathway that runs through the park, along with a number of boulders and seating areas, generally designed as a passive park just to provide a kind of a respite from the city. Just to some widths to give you a sense of the scale, the 8-foot wide path primarily. The lawn is about 7 feet wide through a big chunk of it. Wide is about double that at the entrances. And it is a bit wider up on the far end, although there are a number of trees and other boulders there, so it's kind of broken up in a way. These were the issues that we were primarily trying to address that Councilmember Chin funded the project for. We wanted to, first of all, fix the fountain in the center that had some design issues and was also neglected by lack of maintenance. There was supposed to be a an LMDC maintenance endowment for this, which never materialized, and so Parks was sort of left holding the bag on that one. It doesn't get the maintenance that it needs. We think we can solve that with a different design of the components, so that's one of the upgrades. We have a few minor things as well. This stone dust path along the corner there was, it started to sink. It's not quite as accessible as we'd like it, so we thought it would be good just to replace that with bluestone. Also, the entire area needs an irrigation system, so we want to include that in there as well. So the trees are a major factor here. You can see they cover quite almost all the area, which is definitely a factor in the way the design happened. In fact, if we were designing this today with current standards, we probably couldn't put that path through there. At the time, we just went very carefully, and it was okay by that standard of the day. Now it's the trees are even larger, and it's definitely not something we want to go poking around too much. So when we put in irrigation, we're going to be extraordinarily careful and strategic how that works. Some existing photos to show you basically what it looks like. Again, on very busy Fulton Street, you kind of open up into this green space. It's quite a nice effect, really. The curved path draws you in. This is from Southbridge, that large residential complex, looking back into the park. So we have the three entrances there. And this is from Fulton Street looking west into the park, again, drawing you past. Of course, if you're in a hurry, you can continue to just walk past, but even then, we hope that the view will provide passersby with some interest. The fountain is a key piece for us. We wanted to provide something that had flowing water to, again, kind of mitigate the sound and also provide some just a nice visual. The idea, the concept behind this park was to provide an echo of the upland forest as part of a string of parks along Fulton Street, where we had the beach down by the seaport, moving up to where we have the upland forest here. So the plantings and the stones are reminiscent of that. Here's the seating area that I mentioned with the stone dust path that's starting to deteriorate. And the fountain itself, finally, down on the lower level, there is a bit of a grade change down to the bottom. So this is presently off limits. You can see the range fence off to the side there. So this is what we're proposing to do. I mentioned the irrigation system. We want to spruce up the plantings where we can. We're proposing to replace the lawn with ground cover since it's not being used at this time. We wanted to add, in response to comments from the community board, a small area here where people can actually access that lower pool and add one bench with a very small seating area. I have to emphasize our budget was not designed really to accommodate that, so we're squeezing that in, and I think we can do it, but we can't do anything more than that. And then also we're going to repair the fountain and small path. We also at the same time want to upgrade those range fences to make them a low picket fence, so it matches the outer.
Can you picture what the fence will look like?
I do. Right here. So this is the perimeter fence, looks like this, and we will basically do a smaller version of that with the same finial and the same, it's a very slightly custom take on the standard parks picket. So we just do that, but 2'6", so a low fence, not to interfere with any views or anything, just to formalize that. And of course, matching furniture, but that's already there, the park view bench. Plant materials, again, trying to emphasize this upland forest idea. A lot of these plant materials are already there. We do have the benefit of seeing what's worked and what hasn't, so we're probably generally replacing things that are already there. Adding a few more new ones, such as Tiarella and Heuchera, to add a bit more punch and color. And that's where we are at the moment. So simple project, basically one step above a maintenance project, but it is technically capital. So we've discussed this with the community board. At the last community board, it was unanimously approved. So we're looking forward to moving ahead.
Thank you. All right, I'll just, the names in order as I received them. Joanne Gorman from President.
Yes, High Commissioner. I'm here to support returning the lawn to the public, which was the original design intent. I'm a resident of Southbridge Towers, right adjacent to the park, and I was a member of Friends of Delord from late 2012 through 2015. With a very, though Alex didn't point it out, the fencing will basically lock the public out of the park. But I did find out as a testimony at CB1 that they will require a gate for maintenance. And with simple choices regarding that gate, the public can go back into the lawn without having any additional funding. My recommendation would be to have the fence gate over in this area, which is the widest entrance to Delory, and actually Parks Department often parks their vehicle here when they come in to clean, and they have driven their vehicles in here to get to the park for plantings. So by having the gate located over there, I did check with Alex, it's a gate that can be opened or closed, which would give easy access to the public when, if we wanted it opened, and closed when the lawn needed maintenance or renewal. The other thing about the gate is, as I said, it's the widest area of the park, so it gives accessibility both to maintenance and to the public in the future. I also, it addresses an issue that was cropped up at community board by those opposing letting the public to the lawn. The notion that they presented was it's funneling people, by leaving the lawn open, people were using it as a fourth path, destroying the lawn, and funneling people right to Southbridge Towers. That was the word, park goers were being funneled to Southbridge Towers. By not having a gated entrance here, keeping it closed, and just having one here, you get the public to get back using the lawn, and the funneling issue disappears. One other thing I wanted to address is plantings. Little by little, over the years when the temporary fencing has closed off the area, there's been fill-in with flowers of what would used to be open lawn area. I want to make sure that whatever happens to that lawn, since it's still up for grabs whether that park will be opened again, that no plantings fill in and block us in the future. So all of these choices would allow it to be done with no additional funding, and that's what I'm presenting here today. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person, I can pronounce your first name but not your last, Veronica?
Yeah, that's me. Hi. I'm the founder of Friends of Delory Park, and I've been taking care of a team of about 15 volunteers that go out every day to take care of the park, clean the park, and interact with the community. I support the proposal that's before you. What I don't support, and for many reasons, because of the use of the resources and the reality of taking care of this lawn, I don't know why the lawn has become such a big issue. The lawn is only back because we're taking care of it. It requires a tremendous amount of care. It's a shady area, and it's a very well-used park. So everybody that goes in there, even if we cut it off and put it in that little area, means dogs are going in, kids with scooters are going in, picnic people, everybody eats in the park. It's going to be filled with garbage. We have a lot of rats back there. It means friends have to clean it more. And our proposal is that we add more green space. We're trying to make this park a self-sustaining green space for the whole community, not for a few people to use the lawn. It's at a tipping point. When it first was designed, it was, it was fine, but now the community is huge, and you all know that. It's at a tipping point. It needs an upgrade. It needs to be protected for the future. This doesn't protect it. It makes it vulnerable, costs more money, costs more work, and it serves less people than having a beautiful respite park that we have been really struggling to take care of. Now, I'm in the park all the time as well as the volunteers. We're approached constantly by the bigger community, and I have not spoken to one person that wants to change anything in the park, other than get more flowers, more plants, more green, and keep it lush, and keep it a respite. So the larger community doesn't really support this. Community board doesn't support it, Margaret Chin doesn't, Friends of Delory, Southbridge, which is right on the edge of it, does not support it. So, I don't know, I sent out a thing for people to look at. This is our position.
Is there a representative from Parks here? Yes. Thank you. So if there are no other people. Alex mentioned at the beginning that this was the contemporary situation in terms of the number of parks in the neighborhood. Where I'm going with this question is whether there are opportunities that anyone has found nearby, other than, I think, Fish Bridge, for a dog run.
I don't know that there are any plans for
future dog runs in the area. Fish Bridge is the main closest one, but we have no plans, nor do we have any space to add any more dog runs in that area.
And
That's the
yeah.
closest one, it's about a quarter mile, 10-minute walk from here.
Right, right. I mean, there's this small little precious piece of green, I think encapsulates a lot of the challenges of building a park in a dense city that we have, where there are many, many competing interests. The space isn't enough, and things change over time. And I think that just looking at this from the straight perspective of a landscape architect, which I am, is that the lawn is very difficult to maintain because of the trees. And that a already thin lawn with a little bit of use is next to impossible to maintain. And it's a battle that I would say I think we have to kind of put up the flag and say we lost. I'm sorry that is the case, but I do appreciate that the water feature, which I'm very pleased to hear would be renovated, will at least provide the access to that, but I think it is an unsung part of this part of the park. And so, anyway, I am in support of the proposal before us. Others?
Well, I would concur, although I lament the fact that there's not enough space, and I live in an area that has even less space for green than this, and it's really a struggle. And I think, I mean, I think we have to rely on our professionals to help us understand how to keep this kind of place alive and living and thriving. And hopefully, if there can be more money down the road, that's going to come down later. We don't have to look over the parks here, or I don't know where to look, you know, but I think that we would all want something more than that. We all want it to be open, but I think we've got to try to let it thrive right now.
But just to be absolutely clear, there will be no fences closing the entrances to the park. Is that correct?
There are gates there now that are
Yes.
open during the day.
Right.
Right, but they would remain open as well.
Right. So the only fencing you're showing is really around the plant beds.
Right. So there are hours to the park.
They do close it at night, I believe.
At dusk or dusk.
Typical parks.
parks, they all are.
So I guess we actually have to vote.
Yeah.
So let's see, all in favor of the proposal before us, which includes the low fencing, the additional seating, and the other things Alex mentioned? Second? All in favor?